Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel, Adam Draws Stuff. I am Adam and I draw stuff, and today I'm going to be showing you how to draw an eye. This eye here in particular. I did a tutorial like this before, but I didn't really do a narration. It was just a quick little speed drawing, and I didn't actually go over the process of drawing very well. So I wanted to redo that one today and show you how you can create an eye that looks just like this. It's very realistic and believable. So let's jump in and get going. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is draw a circle here on my paper, and this is going to be the main shape of the eye, and it's underneath your eye is a ball, of course, a ball shape. That's hence the name eyeball. So what I like to do is start with a circle and then go ahead and draw the eyelid on top of that, the opening for the eye. So first I'm just going through and just kind of roughly sketching out a circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. I can't draw a perfect freehand circle, but you can use something circular to trace that if you would like to. That's not a problem at all. I'm just sketching it in here because most of this circle is going to be covered, but this is just going to give us a circular guideline to work from. And now, starting kind of toward the bottom of the circle, we're going to draw the opening of the eyelid, or the opening of the eye rather, so the top and the bottom eyelid. And I'm just drawing sort of a crescent shape that reaches up nearly to the top of the circle, but not quite. We do want to cut it off a little bit at the top, and we're going to do basically the same thing at the bottom. Draw that same concave line down at the bottom, opposite of the top lid. And it doesn't cut off that ball a whole lot, but it does just enough so that now it gives you the basic outline of an eye. And now in the center of that circle that we just drew, well, the first step anyway that we drew, draw a small circle, and that is going to be the pupil. And this is now going to give us an iris and a pupil to work with. And next I'm just going to go in and darken up some of the lines a little bit, just clean them up a little bit along the eyelids and then along the border of the iris. Now we need to create the folds for the upper and lower eyelids. And this is pretty easy. Really all you have to do is draw a fairly straight line running across the top of the eye. And it only needs to curve a little bit. You do want there to be some separation between the top eyelid and the crease of the eye. So what I mean by that is you don't want the crease in the eye to be as curved as the eyelid itself, or the opening of the eyelid. So as you can see, the crease that sits above the eye, I've drawn it a little bit flatter, and then the ends come down at a little bit more of a harsh angle than the eyelid itself. And then on the underside, we can just draw another small line that kind of hugs the bottom eyelid a little bit to form where eventually the lashes are going to go. And now that we have the basic shape of the eye done, we can move up to the eyebrow. And the eyebrow is sort of like almost an S shape if you were to lay it on its side. And as you can see, it basically extends from the tear duct of the eye all the way over to the right to the end of the eye. And the smaller half at the end should be quite a bit higher up and more curved than the thicker end that's close to the tear duct. So now that we have the basic outline of the entire eye done, and the creases and the eyebrow, we can go in and start adding some values. And whenever I'm drawing an eye, I tend to like to shade the white part of the eye first. And the reason that is even though the white of the eye is technically white, white is hardly ever completely white. So a mistake that I see a lot of people doing is, or a lot of beginner artists doing, is they might leave the white of the eye completely blank and completely white. And it really, even though it's white, it's going to have its own shadows, it's going to have its own values and tones within the white part. So I am going to go in here first and add some tones to the white part of the eye. And at first, when there's nothing else here, when there's no other shading that I've done, it's going to look a little bit weird. It almost looks like the eye's bloodshot or something's just not right. You know, it doesn't look right. But this gives us a good baseline to work from. So if basically, if all the other tones around this eye, or the white of this eye, are darker, it's going to look more natural, it's going to look more realistic, and you'll see that later on when we add the rest of the shading in. So now that the white part of the eye is shaded, I'm going to go in here on the iris and just map out some outlines for where the highlights are going to be. And for this, I've chosen, and for this example, I've chosen the light source to come from the top right-hand side. You can see I drew a little circle with some lines going out of it up there at the top right, and that's going to be our light source. So I'm drawing the highlights as kind of sharp lines, and most of them are going to hug the top part of the iris and be on the right side of the iris. So now that I have some highlights mapped out around the iris, I'm going to go in and darken all of this quite a bit. And the darkest part is going to be right underneath the eyelid. And the reason that is because the eyelid is going to be casting a shadow on the iris itself. So that means that the darkest part is going to be, the darkest part of the iris is going to be the part that's closest to the top eyelid, and the lightest part is actually going to be on the bottom. And try as best as you can to keep your lines really clean around the highlights. You want those to stay as crisp and as white as possible, just to really give it a sort of wet, glossy look. So now that we have the whole iris shaded, we can go in and start adding some texture to the eye. And that's done by just drawing a bunch of random lines all pointing toward the center, toward the pupil. And you can kind of randomize them a little bit. You don't necessarily have to make them all super straight. They mostly should be just straight, short, sort of jagged lines, almost like you were drawing a hair texture, and keep them all pointing toward the center of the eye. Now that basically takes care of the iris, so I am just going in and darkening the pupil now and adding in a little bit more shading around the white part of the eye and underneath the eyelid. At this point, we can start to shade the outer part of the eye, all the skin that sits around the eyeball itself. Be sure that you're making your tone, your values, a lot darker than the white part of the eye. Remember from before that was our baseline to start with. That should be the lightest part. So all the skin around the eye is going to need to be quite a bit darker. So now that you have all the outer shading done, it's time to go in and add some eyelashes. And to be honest, this is one of those parts that I still struggle with. I don't know why, but this one just takes practice, and I don't think I've given it enough practice. But following the lash line along the bottom of the eye, go in and add just a bunch of random, wispy, sort of short lines that conform to the general shape of the eye. And on the lower lash line, you should make sure that you're making them pretty short. If you look at your own eye or anybody else's eye, we tend to have much shorter eyelashes on the bottom eyelid than we do on our top eyelid. And this might take you a few times to get it right, so if you want to practice on another sheet of paper, that might not be a bad idea. And to get realistic looking eyelashes, each line should start by curving in toward the eyeball itself and then kind of turning back around and curving outward again. And keep them a little bit random. You can make some of them overlap a little bit too, and that kind of creates a little bit more of a natural, realistic look. And lastly, all we have to do now is give our eyebrow a little bit of texture. And this technique is basically just adding in a whole bunch of straight, jagged lines that kind of follow the general S shape or the general curve of the eyebrow's outline. And if you'd like a little bit more help, I did do a tutorial on how to draw hair, and this is basically all hair is, the same, so this is basically using the same technique. So if you'd like to check out a tutorial on how to draw hair, I will insert a card here or a link in the description, and you can go and get a more in-depth look at how I draw hair. But otherwise, if you don't want to go through all of that, just draw in several random lines. There's not a whole lot of shading in eyebrows. They're pretty simple as far as hair goes. But just draw a whole bunch of lines that follow the general shape of the outline that we drew in the beginning. And here you go, here's our finished product. I did go through and add a little bit more shading just because I felt like there were some places that weren't quite dark enough, and I added a little bit of highlight around the corner of the eye on the skin. But that's basically it. That is how I draw an eye, and hopefully that gave you a little bit of insight or maybe some tips on how you can improve your drawing a little bit when it comes to eyes. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I have plenty more on the way, so if you haven't yet already, subscribe if you feel like it, and give it a like too, because of course that always helps. And I hope to see you in the next one.